everyone, it's Hannah and Kaylin, back again with Double Talk. While most of us can only imagine what it would feel like to free fall off a mountain, Matthias Giraud lives and breathes it. From his humble beginnings to becoming a top athlete in his field, the new documentary Super Frenchie tells Matthias' story and follows him as he weighs his passion for extreme sports against the grounding effects of raising a young family. At the opening of the documentary, I was so in awe of the point of view footage being played because I couldn't believe that something could look both so serene and terrifying at the exact same time. What's actually going through your mind when you're flying through the air in the mountain like that?
It's a very almost primitive kind of mindset because your senses are all heightened and you're highly focused on what you're doing. So it's almost like a very animalistic kind of stage, which is great because you feel almost omnipresent. You know exactly everything that's going on because you're so in tune with what you're doing right now that it's hard to experience that in everyday situation, right? It's one of those rare moments where you just are. It's so connected with what you're doing right now and your surroundings, and your mind and your body almost becomes one and you're fully in sync. And that's when it goes right, of course. And then it's always amazing the exits, but it's almost like everything leading to it. Each turn skiing down the mountain is amplified because you know the magnitude of what's about to come, which is actually at the end of the run, which is normally when most skiers relax. But like, no, when you reach the bottom, this is when you have to keep it even together even more. And then flying off the cliff and seeing that massive avalanche behind me, I
Oh, that.
remember telling myself, look at this as long as you can because you'll never see this ever again in your life. And I could feel almost the lift from the avalanche. It's almost like a power coming from the depth of that canyon. And then flew through no problem. And then when I landed, I just screamed like a little girl.
What's going on physically? Because I've never been skydiving, so I can only imagine that it would be kind of like when you're on a roller coaster and you get that feeling in your stomach. Does it feel similar to that, or is it a different feeling altogether?
When you start jumping with parachutes, you start with jumping out of planes, and you kind of have that roller coaster feeling of that heart in your throat at first.
Yeah.
Like, "Ugh." But as you get used to it, it becomes completely peaceful and relaxing. A huge moment of connection. Again, like everything is happening right there, right now. That it almost becomes a form of flying meditation. I think the state you could reach, like if you're like a master yogi, that you could reach in like 2 hours of meditating and stretching and all doesn't have that mental and physical zen. Well, with base jumping, we kind of cheat, especially ski base jumping. You have it in like a quarter of a second, and it's amazing.
You made a point in the documentary, which is a great takeaway, and that's that you can't allow fear to rule your life and to keep you from doing things that you really want to do. And I think that you're very brave, and that's definitely easier said than done. So I wanted to ask you, what would you say to someone who they want to do something, but they have this fear and they can't push it aside as easily as you can?
We shot that movie over 11 years. And so the way I expressed myself when I was 24 is completely different than when we ended that movie when I was 35. My relationship with fear has evolved. I think when I made that comment, it was when I was 24, 25, and I was pretty much like ignoring my fear. It's just like, okay, I'm scared, but it's whatever. I wasn't really thinking about it and be like, just focus on what you want to do and just don't worry about this, just do it, right? So you always worry, but you worry more what you're doing, which is almost like a distraction from the fear itself. Then after that, I try to manage it, whatever that means, which was more like a moment of managing my anxiety more than anything, because the fear is never gone. Fear is always there. And now at this mature stage of my career and of jumping and skiing, I fully embrace it. Like, I think fear is just the best emotion ever. It's your best friend. I just try to just feel it all. And the more I feel fear, the more it means that I got to take on that challenge. For me, fear has almost become a motivator to maximize my life.
You made a comment that you almost become desensitized to the fear and the thrill of the moment when you're doing something crazy like that, and you kind of have to keep making it crazier and crazier to make the stakes higher and higher. But is there a limit even for you? Like, do you ever see somebody doing something and it's like, that's the line and I would never do that? Or are you just open to anything?
There is a limit physically, if that makes sense. But I have not reached it yet. So I have some very, very ambitious projects. This movie is almost like the end of a certain era in a way, as the story comes full circle. But now it's also the beginning of the next phase in my life as a mountain man. So I have all these crazy projects, I guess seemingly crazy, but methodical for me, where we are mixing alpinism, so climbing with all your gear, steep skiing, so skiing really steep faces, and then base jumping on the bottom. So mixing all these three sports pretty much is having a complete journey through the mountains. And I think that's what the movie shows is the different stages from growing up as like a little skier kid and then turning into a free rider, free skier, and then evolving in base jumping, but then kind of almost picking the low hanging fruit, the cliffs that were more easily accessible, and then even using helicopters and all that. And then it was almost like the last part of the movie probably is my favorite part because it's a state of purity in the way of just doing it for the love of it and really embracing the whole mountain experience instead of approaching it just as a wild ride, approaching it as a full complete existential quest.
There was a point in the documentary where you were actually leaning over a cliff with the calculator, trying to mathematically figure out whether it was a safe jump or not. But you can never really be sure, right? Like, what is it like going into something that no matter how much you plan, the weather can turn on a dime or something can still go very wrong?
On that particular jump, it's a jump that is easily accessible. I could get to the edge. The only variable would be the wind and the hazards in the landing area. So I literally had to calculate my hypotenuse based on my glide ratio to know if I could make it to the landing area and land safely in the only open spot because he was surrounded with boulders, with a river and trees. Any other alternate landing area is not safe. You don't really know until you're there. So you kind of have to pull the trigger when you know that the weather is about 70% good and reliable, and then you got to go and take a chance.
You acknowledge that some people may consider it selfish to do what you do while having a wife and family, but you say that you don't see it that way because what you do isn't reckless and actually very well planned. What would you say to somebody who says there's no way to do what you do and have it not be reckless?
Is flying a fighter jet dangerous? Absolutely, because there's so many variables. But is it very methodical? Absolutely. I don't have 350 instruments in a cockpit to fly. It's my parachute, the wind, my pair of skis. But you have, snow, air, and all this stuff, and your mental state. And so there's a lot of variables to kind of outline and not control, but kind of adapt to. And I was just talking about that with my wife a couple of days ago. There's a difference between, I think the notion that selfish is bad is, I think, almost like a forced concept, because you have to have a certain level of selfishness to be able to self-actualize and reach your goals, right? I think if you don't find that spark in you to have that courage to go for it, I think it will result only in two things. I'm going to sound maybe a little harsh for this, but mediocrity and frustration. You're going to stagnate at what you're doing, and therefore you're going to be frustrated for that, and therefore you're going to be unlivable for your family or your loved ones. Go out there, climb that mountain, seek your quest, or play with that band, or make that sculpture, whatever it is, or fix that old vintage car that you're so passionate about, whatever it is. And then this way, everything falls into place because you have the degree of appreciation for other things that are on the periphery of that because they allow you to do this.
I want to wrap up by asking you about the triangle of happiness, which you mentioned in the documentary. What is the triangle of happiness and how does it apply to your life?
Someone to love, something to look forward to, and something to do right now, however order you want to. Yeah, it's something that I read in a book, which was the biography of Mark Okilupo, who was a professional surfer, and he struggled a lot with depression. He was obese, lost all his weight, won the a world title, or he was vice champion in the world championships, and so has gone through the up and down. And one of his mentors told him, Aussie, you only need three things to be happy in life. One is to do something right now, one is something to look forward to, and one is someone to love. And I think it's very important to have that because we're not that complicated. If you have something that go to bed with a dream and wake up with a plan, you're busy, you're applying your mind and your body to something. And if you know what you're building towards, that's your long-term destination. But then if you can go back to the emotional shelter and connection to have with someone you love, then that's it. That's the triangle.